Hello, Gonzaga basketball fans. We're back at it with a short, quick episode to react to the breaking news. This may not be breaking for House of Kraus members because we shared this information pretty close to as soon as we heard about it. But Gonzaga Director of Basketball Operations and Assistant Coach staff member Jorge Sanz is leaving Gonzaga to join Mike Malone. Is it Mike Malone or Michael Malone? Which one does he not hate? Okay, sorry. Sorry, Michael.
Mike, he gets very upset.
Sorry, Michael. Nothing but respect. Michael Malone, former Denver Nuggets coach, now North Carolina Tar Heels head coach, clearly making a big move.
Kings. Kings
how could we forget? Do you guys remember that graphic that North Carolina came out with of all of the players that Michael Malone quote unquote developed, and LeBron was included on that? That was cool. Anyways, Michael Malone takes Jorge Sanz from the Zags. Jorge has been the DOBO at minimum for the last 7 seasons at Gonzaga. Connor, what kind of impact does this have on the team in the immediate future?
I mean, in the immediate future, and we're not talking 26, 27. I think at this point, immediate future is 27, 28 and onward. At least right now from what we're hearing regarding Gonzaga's recruiting efforts. But assuming that the NCAA does not actually strictly enforce their professional player overseas rules, we're looking at the loss of, and not the only, but a very instrumental piece of their international recruiting staff. He has the connections in Spain, being from Spain. And so that recruiting avenue, that recruit branch of the recruiting tree, just got damaged, just went away. And again, I don't know what is going to happen regarding that rule, specifically the rule about going after professional European players. But assuming, and I want to assume that it's just a nothing burger, that nothing's going to change, Gonzaga does have a hole to fill in strengthening or reestablishing that pipeline to Spain and some other parts of Europe to get some more of those athletes into Spokane.
Austin, you have plenty of experience with the machinations or the process that a coaching staff goes through and kind of like the chain of command and responsibilities. Can you talk to what kind of impact Jorge had on the team as a DOBO and kind of compare that for like a high major kind of program in Gonzaga versus like a typical DOBO position?
Yeah, there's a couple different ways that role plays out. So in a lot of programs, you kind of have like your structure is your student managers, then your graduate assistants, then you have your DOBO and your video coordinator that are like, hey, you just finished being a graduate assistant. Now you're in this role. You either go the video coordinator route or you go the DOBO route. And that's how you're kind of starting your career. And then the goal is to make it to an assistant coach. That is not how that role has really worked at Gonzaga over the last 15 plus years. It's been a really important person in that role with quite a bit of responsibility. Obviously Jorge, but previously it was Ricardo Foix. And the responsibility and role of a DOBO is, at least in the Gonzaga program, is one, heading up the internal analytics program at Gonzaga. The second one is scheduling. It is incredibly important for Gonzaga to schedule well and schedule intelligently. And that was Jorge's job. In the immediate future, the one thing that Connor didn't mention is that there are still spots on the calendar and the schedule to fill. And so that is something that they're going to need to figure out. Now, was Jorge making every single decision and doing that? No. Obviously, it was a group effort in a meaningful way. I don't think that 3 or 4 years ago, whenever it was, Jorge called up Kentucky's DOBO and it's like, hey, let's schedule. It's like that's not how that worked, right? So there is still a role that's being played by Mark and his relationships, but at the end of the day, quite a bit of the scheduling got done by Jorge, and he did a really good job. Right, every single year we come in, except for last year, that didn't go well for us as far as the schedule. It was worse than what we were hoping for, but I wouldn't chalk that up to being his fault, right? But as we've talked about a lot with Rocco, whether in the firesides or on our podcast, like scheduling is incredibly important because scheduling dictates what seed you can actually get in the tournament. And your seed line really, really, really matters for how far you can actually go into a tournament and winning a national championship. So that's the other thing. But then the last thing, which Connor already hit on, like for Gonzaga, he played a really important role in recruiting. He was somebody that was going out on the road like just last week. He's in Slovenia at the U20s. Recruiting kids. He has meaningful international relationships. And while there has been a shift in the way that international recruiting works, that it's not purely just relationship based, it's, hey, so for example, 2 guys that didn't choose Gonzaga initially because of relationship building, but because of the program fit and the money being offered is one guy, Jack Kyle, which obviously he didn't end up coming, but the other one is Nathan D'Souza, right? There wasn't like a prior relationship that came from Jorge. That, in my understanding, was more Kurt. That was kind of heading up that recruitment and was more important there. So you still have like international recruiting, and you don't have to have an international person on staff like Jorge with those great relationships, but it certainly helps. And if it is going to be a meaningful part of the Gonzaga program, which it has been for years and years and years, I think you're going to need to bring in somebody with meaningful international ties to 2 options. You either go the Spanish route, and you have good relationships with players and agents in the Spanish national team, which obviously, as we've experienced over the last couple of weeks, has its fucking ups and downs. Or you go down the Mega route. Mega is probably, outside of Spain, the best producer of young talent. You've obviously seen this happen with Illinois, but going down that route is probably your best bet. Mega is a lot less territorial about their players and are not trying to fight back to the same degree as a lot of these EuroLeague teams. All right, you're going to see teams like Barcelona and Real Madrid, and obviously Valencia just did this, but like those teams that are in EuroLeague and do have some money and are like betting on developing these players and having them a part of their system, they're fighting back, whereas Mega a little bit less so, right? They're not in EuroLeague. They don't have the same kind of money, but they have probably the best development system of any program in all of Europe, right? They produce the best bigs in all of Europe, and they have good guards as well. It's not like they're just a big man factory. So I think you have to go one of those 2 routes for that role. I think you need to have those meaningful relationships in international recruiting to continue to give yourself an edge, because just winning on the margin, or not like winning just on, hey, we have an available option here and we have money, does that work? It doesn't distinguish you, right? It just doesn't. And that's something that Gonzaga needs is those relationships and international recruiting to distinguish themselves.
Connor, are there any hopes that you have for how they fill the DOBO spot and the bench assistant spot, or is it going to largely be like an outside hire versus moving somebody up the chain of command?
I think it'll probably be an outside hire, at least for the assistant spot. One thing that was floated to us was moving someone within the program to DOBO. and then just hiring outside. I don't know if that's something that they would do, or if they would look outside to get a DOBO. But I do think that they're gonna need to think a little bit outside the box on this one, because I don't know if there's Gonzaga has international players that are in coaching. I don't know if any of them have the ties that we would want to fill that role on the recruiting trail, as opposed to just being international players that are now in coaching.
Yeah, it seems that this is definitely not a completely new chapter, but the program is in an interesting spot where we know who the coach in waiting is. We don't know how long Mark Few is going to stay a head coach. We do know that he said at the Final Four this year, when his Hall of Fame announcement was occurring, that if he knew that Tommy Lloyd would have stayed, he would have retired way back then. But at the same time, you could also see that he has enough energy. I mean, clearly by the fact that he's willing to be an assistant coach for the upcoming Olympics, that he has the interest and the capacity to want to still be coaching the game in 2028. So there is that. You lose your DOBO of 7 years, and then you have an assistant coach in Steven Gentry who's interviewed for other jobs, which is by far within his right. And honestly, that's what he should be doing as a guy that likely wants to become a head coach. And maybe the coach doing the most on your current bench is the youngest actual assistant coach on the team, Zach Norvell. So it just seems to me like this is definitely an inflection point for what the program needs to do to figure out their identity for the next handful of years.
Unquestionably, I don't think that you can. Anybody that's going to try to minimize this news, you're wrong, right? Why would Michael Malone, who just took the North Carolina job, try to poach Jorge Sanz? It's not because he sucks or he's not important. It's the exact opposite of that. It's not like, oh, hey, you're just getting an assistant coaching job and this is just the next, thing up. That's not what this is, right? He's poaching him because of his importance in developing Gonzaga's international recruiting post Tommy Lloyd and how important that is. And he wants to make that a backbone of North Carolina's program. If that doesn't tell you how important he was, I don't know what to tell you. You just clearly don't really understand how college basketball works. So this is obviously a hit. Does it mean that he's irreplaceable? No, but it's definitely difficult. Personally, on my side, the things that are the least important are analytics. That's something that you can outsource. The day-to-day, DOBO responsibilities and the scheduling, scheduling is very important, but you can find somebody to do that. The most important thing is the international recruiting to me, just by far. That's the thing that matters the most without question. And finding somebody that has those relationships really does matter. Not just the relationships, but the actual talent evaluation. That matters. Having those relationships to know who to trust about a kid, but also doing the right evals about those kids, and then being the person, especially, look, we're all pretty pissed off about Mario, but the fact that Mario, without question, didn't look at any other program when he was coming to the U.S. and was just obviously I will be going to Gonzaga, is hey, this is a prized player from one of the best nations in the world at producing basketball talent, and they chose one place for that player to go. And that's Gonzaga. And that is, one, it's Gonzaga, but also it's Jorge, right? If Jorge's not there, Mario is not coming to the States and playing at Gonzaga. That's just a fact. And obviously he was important. We're We're talking about Mario. We're talking about Masamba Diop being an important part of like his recruitment. Isan Omansa, like those were supposed to be potentially your 3 best players, or 3 of 4, maybe best players on the roster. That chose Gonzaga partially because of Jorge, right? So it absolutely matters, and his replacement is going to be very, 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 very important.
I also think, just talking about thinking outside the box, like Mark Few is still there. He's the only coach in the top 10 in wins with under 30 years of head coaching experience. He's the second youngest. Like he's not old, but he is on his way out. Like this is almost as much a B Mike hire as it is a Mark Few hire, and I think Michelson's also going to have to think outside the box, because he's not Mark Few. Whether he's as good a coach or not, that's a different question. He's not Mark Few. And so he's going to have to think about how to build a program where they can continue on. They still have the Gonzaga pedigree. They don't have the Hall of Fame coach when B. Mike becomes the head coach. So they're going to have to think outside the box. And I do think that this is a replacement hire that is going to be both of them coming to a decision. Mark Few can't just hire who he wants. Like it very much has to be a collaboration between him and Michelson, because if the handoff is going to happen, this new coach, there's a likelihood he's going to be on the staff, and Michelson could fire him, but like for continuity's sake, you kind of want Michelson to buy in as well.
A lot of interesting moving pieces to this for sure. He's already got a ring. Does Connor Griffin want to do anything? Is that weird? Is that a weird ask? I don't know. No. I'm just spitballing here. I
love Connor, so
just like it's clear that it's gotta be, as you guys both mentioned, outside the box and kind of looking towards the future more so than staying within like, the proverbial small pool of talent that is already in Spokane. There's just a need, obviously, with international recruiting. International recruiting is going to be more and more important as college basketball continues to exist. It's interesting considering the talent from the high school ranks that Gonzaga's gotten over the last calendar year, how that impacts maybe how they view international recruiting. Maybe they don't go after as frequently the 19-year-old, 18-year-old wonder kid that's going to be one and done or 2 years or less. And maybe they kind of start looking for the kind of 2 years of eligibility, basically an international JUCO kind of situation in terms of eligibility available. And kind of go that route to more round out the roster than be central pieces. But yeah, I think it's clear that the program is going to miss Jorge. I think best of luck to Jorge. Obviously, his impact is pretty clear over his 7 years with the program, and yeah, we'll be back if we hear more information about.
There might be more news, Tuck.
There might be more news. There might be more breaking news.
Interesting.
Interesting. Keep tuning in anytime. We'll flash the alert if there's a new pod, but we're always podcasting. It feels like for an hour to 2 hours. So breaking it up with these little kind of emergency pods that, if you're a part of House of Kraus, isn't an emergency because you're already aware. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, they've been digesting it for like 2 weeks now.
Yeah, they're not in utter chaos. Be sure to subscribe, hit like. We appreciate you all, and we'll talk to you soon.